Good morning, my fellow yogic travelers. I'm mighty glad to be alive today, and I hope that you are too as we continue to live, laugh, love, learn, linger, live the life we love. First, I want to give a shout out to Ruth Ann Baker, one of my longtime friends and students. I appreciate you tuning in and letting me know that you're getting something from these morning daily talks. Thank you so much. Today is Story Day, and I'm going to go into one of my favorite fairy tales called The Six Who Made Their Way Through the World. It's a variation of another story that I like to tell called The Companions, but we'll start with this one. It's in Grimm's. I think you'll get a kick out of it. Once there was a man who served in the army for many, many years, fought in a lot of wars, really defended his country. He was a great patriot. But when the war was over, he got his dismissal, and they booted him out of the army, and all they gave him was a couple of farthings for all the years of service and risking his life like that. He said, I'm not content with this. If this is the only thing that they can give me, I'm going to write it. I'm going to right the wrong, and somehow the king one day will give me his whole treasury. So, with that in his mind, full of anger, he went into the forest and he came across a man who was plucking up trees as easy as a person could pull up a blade of grass. And he said to him, Well, if you'd be my servant, I'm sure the two of us together would make our way in the world. I said, Okay, but first I got to deliver these trees home to my mother. And he grabbed another tree and wrapped it around all the trees, and he put it up on his shoulder like you would put up a bag of groceries or something like that. It was kind of amazing. And so off they went after he delivered him home to his mom. And as they're going a little way or a long way or whatever time it takes in these stories, they saw another guy in the grass with a gun shouldered to his head, on his shoulder, and they said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm about to shoot the eye off of a fly 2 miles away." I said, "Wow, you must be an unbelievable sharpshooter as well as great in your sight. Listen, would you like to come with us? I'm sure if the three of us went together, we could make our way through the world." So he said, "Fine." So they're walking on, and all of a sudden they come upon seven windmills that all of a sudden seem to be turning by themselves. And there was no wind. They were like, how is it possible that they're turning like that? And then after a while, they came to a man, and they saw the guy must have been left nostril breathing. And by blowing through his nostril like this, all of a sudden, all the windmills were turning. I said, wow, that's unbelievable. You want to come with us? I'm sure if the four of us made our way through the world, nothing could stop us. Well, he said, fine, too. And then they came by another man, and this guy was sitting by the side of the road, and he had like one leg, like a prosthetic device, taken off. And they said, "What's your story?" He says, "Oh, listen, if I put this leg on, I can run faster than any birds can. It's just amazing." I think that's very interesting. Why don't you come with us also? The five of us, I'm sure we can make our way through the world. Nothing can stop us. Well, he said, yes, also. And then finally, before long, they came upon one other guy, and he was sitting there with his hat kind of on the side of his head. And, our hero, our main protagonist, said, "You look like a fool with that on the side of your head. What are you wearing it that way for?" He says, "You don't understand. If I put it straight on my head, everything turns to frost. I freeze everything. It's just unbelievable. So in order not to kill everything around me with frost, I keep it on the side." He says, "I think that's very, very important. We should have somebody like you too. So come on, if the six of us went together, we could make our way through the world." So they did. And after a while, they heard that the king proclaimed that anybody who could run faster than his daughter, who was apparently the fastest person in the world, would marry her and inherit the kingdom. But if they lost the race, then you lose your head. So our hero said, "Okay, I think this is a great idea." He went to the king and said, "I want to do the thing, but can my servant run instead?" The king said, "Yeah, your servant can run instead, but just remember, if the servant loses both his head and your head, that's it. Fine." So the idea was they set up the race. They had to run to a certain distance where there was a spring and fill a pitcher up with water and bring it back. Whoever went first, whoever brought it back first, they're the winner. So they both got their pitchers, off they ran, and within a nanosecond, you couldn't see the runner. He was so fast, he went by you, leaving the princess behind. Anyway, he got to the spring, filled up his pitcher, started his way back, and then after a while, he said, I'm feeling kind of fatigued. So he laid down for a moment and rested his head on an old horse's head that was lying there. So he used that as a pillow. Now, in the meantime, the princess caught up to him and see that he was like lying down. So she emptied his pitcher and then started to run back to the finish line. Now, back at the beginning, the sharpshooter noticed with his eyes what had happened, and thank God that he had the skill that he did. He aimed his rifle and he shot out the horse's head that the runner was using as a pillow without disturbing him. And the runner woke up, realized what had happened, grabbed his pitcher, ran back to the spring, filled it up, and went back to the finish line minutes ahead of the princess. Well, the king and the king's daughter were not very, very happy about the idea of her having to marry a discharged soldier. So they plotted against him. How can we get rid of these guys? So the king had an idea. He said he invited him into this room that had an iron floor, closed all the doors and everything, told them, oh, we're going to have a big feast for you to honor you. And then when they closed and locked all the doors, he had the cook create a fire, a conflagration underneath the floor of the iron room, figuring he'd like burn him to death. Now, of course, when the room started to get heated up, at first they were a little warm, but then when they realized something was happening, they couldn't get out of the room, they didn't know what to do. Well, the man with the cap, he put it straight on his head, and all of a sudden, the whole room froze. All the food froze, and they were almost going to die from frostbite. But during this time, the king think like, okay, they're in there for a couple of hours. They're definitely dead. And so he opened the door to see what was happening. There they were, alive and well, saying, gee, this food is so cold. Come on, I thought we were going to give us a feast with something we could eat. So he was really upset about that. Nonetheless, he plotted something else. He said, all right, listen, I don't want you to marry my daughter, but I'll give you some gold. You can take the golden kingdom as much as you can carry. All right, fine. So what happened was they sent the man who was ripping up the trees and had the strength of 25 people, and they sent him with a linen sack. And when the king saw him coming with this sack that was like so huge, he said, all right, put the gold in there. And they kept on putting gold and more gold and more gold, 16 carts of gold, 7,000 carts of gold. It barely filled up the sack. And the king said, I don't have any more gold. And the giant strongman said, oh, listen, sometimes you close a sack when it's not full. I'll take this and that's it. So he brought it up on his shoulder. Off they went. And now the king was really upset because the wealth of the kingdom had been completely devastated by this guy. And so he said, they're not going to get away with it. So he sent 2 regiments of his army out to get them. And of course, as soon as our hero and his companions saw what was going on, the blower turned around, blocked off one nostril, made a blast like that. The whole regiment just flew up in the air like that, scattering people here and there. But finally, he let back on his nostril so that the sergeant, who was the head of the regiment, who had paid his dues and didn't really deserve to have a ill treatment, he let him down softly and I said, listen, you go back and tell the king, this is what's going to happen to anybody else. If they come here, we'll blow them to kingdom come. The sergeant was very happy for his life being saved. He went back, told the king. The king said, listen, these guys must be functioning under some kind of magic because there's nothing we can do. So they let them go. And then the companions, they divided the sack of gold, and they all lived happily and contented for the rest of their life. So that's an interesting kind of story. Remember, the basic idea is that as you're along on the path, these different individuals, each one with a different kind of power or strength, or apparently some magical ability to do something, they're like the different things inside yourself that arise when you face problems, that we all have these unbelievable gifts and magical companions in the form of personality attributes. So find your own, and I'm sure if you have a few of those people in your life, you'll make your way through the world as well.